So imagine you're moving to a new house, right? You pack up your life into cardboard
Which
boxes.
is stressful enough on its own.
Oh, totally. You load them into a truck, you head across town, and, you expect a few minor hiccups. Maybe coffee table gets scuffed or...
A box of winter coats ends up in the basement instead of the attic.
Yeah, exactly. Annoying, but you deal with it. But now imagine there's a catch to this move. Like, if the movers accidentally mislabel a single box containing your prescription medication as baking spices, the local authorities are legally required to condemn the entire house.
Wow. I mean, the stakes are completely, overwhelmingly disproportionate to the mistake there.
Right. And it sounds absurd when we apply it to moving furniture, but welcome to today's deep dive. Because when we transition that concept to moving data in highly regulated industries, it is the absolute reality.
Yeah, a single mislabeled digital box can literally bring a billion-dollar company to a dead halt.
Exactly. So whether you are prepping to lead a massive corporate IT project or trying to demystify pharmaceutical compliance, or you're just insanely curious about how the world the most critical data is managed, you are in the exact right place.
We are getting right into it today.
We are. Our mission today is extracting the core methodology from a really specialized, industry-defining document. It's the Data Migration Validation Guide, authored by Omer Simon, the CEO of Validfor.
And it's such a critical piece of literature, really, because it shatters a very common, very dangerous misconception.
Oh, the copy-paste myth.
Exactly. Most people, even seasoned tech professionals, often assume data migration is just, a supersized version of copy and paste. Like you highlight the old database, copy it, and paste it into the shiny new cloud software.
But in fields like pharma, life sciences, medical device manufacturing, treating migration like a simple copy-paste job is just a fast track to disaster.
Oh, absolutely. We're talking about environments where a lost decimal point or a shifted time zone during an upgrade doesn't just crash a server.
Right. It triggers a massive regulatory nightmare. Or worse, it actually compromises patient safety. Which brings us to the central thesis of our deep dive today.
The golden rule.
The golden rule. It's a phrase you really have to internalize. Record meaning preserved.
Record meaning preserved. That is the true north of any migration. And to pull this off, you have to understand exactly how global enterprise companies move mountains of highly sensitive data without breaking the law.
And without failing a rigorous regulatory inspection. But before we get into the actual mechanics of moving the data, we have to lay down the baseline.
We need to understand the strict regulatory laws governing how that move actually happens.
Because, you can't play the game if you don't know who is refereeing, right?
Exactly. And the primary referee in this space is a regulation known as Annex 11, specifically Section 4.8.
Annex 11, which is essentially the European rulebook for computerized systems in pharmaceutical manufacturing.
Right. And Section 4.8 is very clear. It mandates that data must not be altered in value and value nor meaning during a migration.
Okay, let's unpack this. Because value and meaning sound like synonyms, but in a database, they are radically different things.
They really are. What's fascinating here is how easily people mix them up. The value might just be, say, the number -20.
Right, the raw number.
But the meaning is the context. Does that -20 represent degrees Celsius for a critical vaccine storage freezer?
Or is it a financial loss in dollars?
Exactly. If you move the number -20, but the new system drops the negative sign so it reads as +20.
Oh, wow. Then you have fundamentally altered the biological reality of that data. You've kept the numeral, but you completely destroyed the meaning.
And that destroys trust. A regulatory inspector will instantly halt your operations if they see that metadata, the data providing that context, is being stripped away during a software upgrade.
And it's not just Annex 11, right? You also have to contend with Part 11.
Yeah, FDA Part 11, that's the U.S. regulation ensuring that electronic records and digital signatures are as trustworthy and legally binding as a physical signature on paper.
Plus, you have oversight agencies like the MHRA, which is the UK's equivalent of the FDA and PICS.
Right. PICS is essentially a global cooperative of regulatory inspectors.
And they're all demanding long-term accessibility. They want to know that 10 years from now, they can look at a batch of medicine and trace its exact history.
And, the regulatory landscape isn't static either. It's shifting.
Right. Annex 11 Revision 1 has been the law of the land since, June 2011?
Yeah, 2011. But regulations evolve right alongside technology. The EU actually opened a draft consultation to revise Chapter 4 and Annex 11, which goes into effect in July 2025.
Oh, wow. So what does that update do?
This new draft heavily reinforces supplier oversight and data integrity. The net tightening is very clear. As our software gets more complex, the regulators' microscopes just get stronger.
Okay, so if we go back to our moving analogy from earlier, migrating regulated data isn't like moving a couch. It's like moving a massive, fragile historical library.
That's a great way to look at it.
You can't just dump the books into a new building. You have to preserve the card catalog, the exact order of the shelves, the history of who checked out what.
Even the original temperature of the archive room, yeah.
Yeah.
And because the stakes are that high, when you are presenting your finished project to inspectors, you shouldn't get creative with your language.
You want to use their exact phrase, right? Value and door meaning.
Verbatim. Put it right in your validation packages. It's a psychological tactic as much as a compliance one.
Like, don't make an inspector guess if your internal jargon means the same thing as their rule book.
Exactly. By using their own language, you explicitly state that you have internalized and satisfied their specific requirement.
Okay, so we know the stakes. The regulators are watching, and dropping a decimal point can ruin your entire year. The logical next step is scoping out the actual move.
Right, the triage phase. You have to categorize the data before you even think about packing it up. First step is defining scope and separating data into classes.
Like master data, transactional records, e-signatures, audit trails, that kind of thing.
Spot on. And the crucial strategy here is that not all data is treated equally.
Wait, hold on. If the stakes are this astronomical, my instinct as a project manager is to just copy-paste absolutely everything. Like move 100% of the data, test 100% of the data.
It seems like the safer route, right?
Yeah. If you move everything, you can't lose anything. Why go through the massive headache of classifying data as critical or non-critical? Doesn't leaving things out introduce more risk?
It seems incredibly counterintuitive, I know. But trying to move and manually test everything actually introduces massive risk and testing bloat.
Really? How so?
This is where you apply a risk-based methodology, specifically aligning with CSA, or computer software assurance.
Ah, right. The FDA initiative.
Exactly. CSA basically says, look, focus your testing effort on what actually impacts patient safety. Don't treat a font color preference with the same rigor as a drug dosage.
Okay, so it's about resource allocation. If you force your quality assurance team to do a 100% manual verification of every single non-critical data point like secondary descriptions or old formatting tags, the project will just take years.
Years. But more importantly, the human beings doing the checking will develop fatigue blindness.
Fatigue blindness. That makes so much sense. If someone reviews 10,000 rows of trivial data, their eyes will just glaze over.
Yeah, and they will absolutely miss the one critical error in row 10,001. So you establish risk logic.
Meaning fields that directly affect product quality, patient safety, or compliance are flagged.
Right. Identity fields, dosages, approval signatures, those are your critical attributes. You do 100% checks for those.
And for the rest.
For non-critical attributes, you use risk-based statistical sampling.
Got it. You also have to define the type of move you're making, right? Like you might be doing a one-time full load.
Or you might do phased delta loads, which means you move the bulk of the data, let people keep working, and then later just move the delta, the small amount of data that changed since the first copy.
Or you might be moving from an old server sitting in your basement to a SaaS environment entirely hosted in the cloud. And frankly, sometimes the smartest move is to, well, not move the data at all.
Yes, that is a highly strategic option known as legacy data archiving.
You essentially put a lock on the door of the old house.
Precisely. You leave the historical data exactly where it is in a validated, read-only state.
Which satisfies the MHRA and PICS requirements for long-term accessibility, but completely eliminates the risk of corrupting it during a transfer.
Exactly. It's a very smart play when applicable.
Okay, so you've categorized everything. You know what's critical, you know what you're sampling, you know what you're archiving. The data is packed up and shipped.
Now you have to actually prove to the regulators that you didn't break anything in transit.
Right. You have to build an unbreakable chain of evidence. Here's where it gets really interesting.
The evidence lives in three core areas: mapping verification, referential integrity, and metadata with audit trails.
Let's start with mapping verification. That's essentially checking the field-by-field transfer, right?
It is, but it's not just looking for missing words. It's hunting for specific defect patterns. Like, one major issue is UTF-8 encoding.
UTF-8. That's essentially the translation matrix a computer uses to turn ones and zeros into the letters on your screen, right?
Exactly. If your old system uses one translation matrix and your new system uses a different one, a special character like the Greek microsymbol used for micrograms might suddenly render as a completely random wingding or a question mark.
Oh, wow. And instantly, a critical dosage instruction becomes unreadable.
Exactly. Another invisible threat in mapping verification is the trailing space.
Wait, literally just a space character at the end of a word.
Yes, a human reading a screen can't see it, but to a database query, the word aspirin and aspirin with a space at the end are two entirely different chemical compounds.
So if you don't clean that up, your search functionality is totally broken.
Completely.
Okay, so you've fixed the spaces, you've sorted the weird characters. The data itself is mathematically clean. But clean data is totally useless if it forgets who its family is.
Right, which brings us to the second area of evidence, referential integrity.
Let's do a family tree analogy here. In a database, records are linked. You have parent records and child records.
And this is exactly where complex migrations often unravel.
Let's walk through a practical scenario. Imagine a manufacturing line produces a batch of blood pressure medication, and a tech notices a slight discoloration in the pills. They log a deviation record in the system.
Right, and that deviation automatically triggers a CAPIA, a corrective and preventive action, which outlines the steps to fix the manufacturing machine.
So the KPA is the child record, and the deviation is the parent. Now, what happens if during migration, the link between those two records severs?
You create what the guide literally calls an orphan. The KPA record still exists, but it's floating in a void.
It has no context.
Right, it doesn't know what machine it's supposed to fix or what batch of pills was discolored.
Which means the company might accidentally ship that discolored batch to pharmacies because the new system forgot that a fix was required. The chain of quality assurance is totally compromised.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, to prove to an inspector that no records were orphaned, you have to present the holy grail of the migration.
The data reconciliation report.
Yes. This is your ultimate proof of completeness. It contains record counts by object and status, proving nothing was left behind.
And it contains an exception log, right? So if an error did happen, there's a transparent trail from the defect to how you fixed it to the evidence of the fix.
Exactly. And crucially, it uses hash totals for key numeric fields to detect silent drift.
Okay, let's demystify hash totals because it sounds incredibly complex, but it's actually a brilliant piece of math.
It really is.
A hash total is like a cryptographic meat grinder. You take an entire column of millions of numeric values in your old system, run them through this algorithm, and it spits out a single, unique, complex string of characters, like a digital fingerprint.
And then you run the exact same algorithm on the new system after the data lands.
And if the database suffered from silent drift, meaning, say, it's subtly rounded 1.0001 down to 1.00 without triggering an error,
The hash total on the new system will be radically different.
it proves mathematically, without any human intervention, that the values are identical. It removes human fatigue entirely from the verification process.
It's foolproof. So the basic numbers are moved, the fingerprints match, the parents are linked to the children.
But we still have to deal with the messy stuff, don't we? The edge cases and curveballs that do not fit neatly into a spreadsheet.
Oh yeah, these edge cases are where you truly earn your compliance badge. We're talking about e-signatures, time zones, attachments, and managing coexistence.
Let's tackle electronic signatures. Because under FDA Part 11, they have to retain their full legal effect.
Right.
Like if I sign a paper mortgage document, the bank can't just take a pair of scissors, cut out my signature, and tape it to a completely different contract. In the digital world, that's forgery.
Precisely. An electronic signature isn't just a JPEG image of your handwriting. It is an irrefutable digital audit trail of intent.
So when you migrate it, you have to map the signer's identity, the precise reason they signed it, the date, and the meaning of the signature.
Because if you move the approved stamp, but lose the reason for approval, that signature is legally void in the new system.
Wow. And that ties directly into the nightmare of time zones. Let me pitch a tricky real-world scenario to you.
Let's hear it.
Imagine I'm a quality manager in Tokyo. I digitally sign a batch approval at 9 a.m. on a Tuesday, local time. But our new centralized sauce system is hosted on servers based in London. How do we ensure the time zone shift doesn't accidentally make it look like I signed the document before it was even created?
That chronological paradox happens constantly in poorly managed migrations. You have clinical trial data happening globally, and if the chronology shifts, the scientific integrity of the trial is ruined.
So what's the solution?
Normalization. Time zone conversions must be strictly verified against a reference table and normalized.
Normalized, meaning you establish a single source of truth for time like converting absolutely everything to coordinated universal time, or UTC.
That's exactly it. You have to prove mathematically that the chronological reality of the events remains exactly as it occurred in the real world. You can't just slap a new time zone label on an old timestamp.
It's similar to how you have to handle file attachments then. The guide is very clear that you have to inventory attachments by file type and size.
Because it doesn't matter if you successfully migrated a crucial PDF report if the new system's document viewer corrupts the file so no one can actually read it.
Right. You have to confirm readability in the target viewer
Right.
and preserve links back to the parent record.
And while you're dealing with all of this, you often have a period of partial migrations or coexistence.
Oh, when you are running the old legacy system and the new system in parallel while the transition finishes.
Yeah. You have to explicitly document how users will find the full history of a record across both systems. Regulators despise blind spots.
If an inspector asks for a record, you can't say, well, half of it is over here, and we're not sure how to access the other half right now.
That is a fast way to fail an audit.
Okay. So the data is moved, the CAPA records are linked, the hash totals are verified, the time zones are normalized to UTC, the system is live.
The fun part.
Now comes the moment of truth. You are sitting across the conference table from a regulatory inspector. How do you defend your work?
Well, this is the moment that usually causes a lot of panic. But the psychology of an audit is really misunderstood. Inspectors aren't necessarily looking for absolute perfection. They know software is messy.
Right. What they're looking for is a defensible, heavily documented system for catching imperfections.
Exactly. They are testing your methodology.
So what does this all mean? It means this guide effectively turns a terrifying regulatory audit into an open book test. You literally know the exact questions they will ask. So let's role play this.
Okay, let's do it.
The inspector looks at you and asks, show me where you covered Annex 11, Section 4.8 on altering value or meaning.
You don't hesitate. You open your final verification package, point directly to your mapping verification and your negative test results, and show them the exact phrase, value and/or meaning preserved, in your approved documentation.
Boom. Next, they ask, how did you protect the trustworthiness of electronic records during the move?
You show them your Part 11 controls. You walk them through the identity mappings, the security protocols, and the cryptographic hash totals that prove no silent drift occurred.
Okay, what if they ask, if you chose not to migrate the historical audit trails, how will my agency review them?
Easy. You log into the legacy system right there in the room. You demonstrate the validated read-only access, proving that the historical data is locked in amber, unalterable, but fully searchable.
And finally, the big one. What data did you check 100% and what did you sample?
That is when you slide the data reconciliation report across the table. You show them your risk logic based on the CSA methodology.
Explaining that fields critical to patient safety received 100% verification, while low-risk formatting fields received statistical sampling to prevent fatigue blindness.
Exactly. The narrative you are building for the inspector through all this documentation must culminate in a very specific, plain language statement from the project owners.
A formal declaration stating that record meaning is preserved.
It is incredibly empowering when you realize that a data migration in a regulated industry isn't just, an IT chore delegated to the basement. It is a high-stakes lifecycle event requiring surgical precision.
So, if you've absorbed the mechanics we've unpacked today, from Annex 11 to hash totals to referential integrity, you are now fully equipped to be the smartest person in the room during any software upgrade or cloud migration discussion.
You truly understand that you aren't just moving ones and zeros. You're preserving the integrity of the scientific process itself.
You are ensuring that the data proving a life-saving drug is safe remains completely uncorrupted, no matter what server it lives on.
It fundamentally changes how you view digital infrastructure. But, it also raises a rather profound question as we look to the future of data management.
You're thinking about the legacy data archiving, aren't you? The strategy of putting a lock on the door of the old house.
I am, yeah. Because it is a brilliant compliance-friendly solution for mitigating migration risk today. You leave the massive historical audit trails in a validated read-only system to satisfy the long-term access rules. But if we project that strategy forward...
Right. Technology moves incredibly fast. Companies upgrade their enterprise systems every 5 to 10 years. If the standard practice becomes just leave the old data in a read-only legacy system, what does that look like in 30 years?
Are pharmaceutical companies just going to accumulate massive digital graveyards?
Endless rows of obsolete servers running dead software, kept on expensive life support in read-only mode, waiting for a regulatory inspector who might never actually ask to see them.
Yeah.
How sustainable is a future where we are permanently forced to maintain the ghosts of old software just to validate the new? It really makes you wonder if legacy archiving is a permanent solution, or if we are just kicking a massive, incredibly expensive can down the road for the next generation of IT professionals to deal with.
It's a complex reality. The digital footprint of science is only getting heavier.
It really is. Something for you to ponder the next time you hit copy and paste. Remember, moving this data isn't moving a pouch, it's moving the entire historical library. And sometimes it seems like we have to build an entirely new museum just to hold the old card catalog. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive.